Okay, this is Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. We just had a very interesting discussion on Ehsan Ahari with Kali'i Akina and Roger Epstein about making Hawaii the center of harmony in the Pacific, transformation into harmony. And as we talk about harmony and the right way and being kind to each other and then pervading the spirit of aloha, that's not happening in Syria. And we're calling this show, which is now Asia in Review, we're actually west of Asia, we're calling it Syria, Go or No Go, with our old friend Ehsan Ahrari. Dr. Ahrari was teaching at the APCSS a couple, 3 years ago. Now he's consulting in Washington under the name Strategic Paradigm, or Paradigms, and he consults with many organizations about exactly what is happening in the Middle East. Welcome again to the show, Ehsan.
Thank you, Jay.
So today, Syria, Go or No Go, a snapshot and maybe a prediction of where we are and where we are going on military options against Assad in Syria. And I wanted to get your take on it, given all the action, all the million things that have been going on. I guess the first question I would raise with you after our last discussion on this very subject is, was the president right strategically, diplomatically, politically, in giving the matter to Congress and laying it at Congress's door?
Well, I think, that's violation of the tradition. Presidents have not usually done that. President have reserved the right for taking military action to themselves, but from my perspective, I don't think Obama has really done a bad job I don't call that a bad decision. It bought some time, it delayed military action, and if we can avoid war because of President Obama's decision to hand the onus of burden of decision to Congress, that's not a bad thing. As things are evolving, because of the delay in military action, it looks like the brinkmanship worked, and President Obama's threat to use military action against Syria has probably forced Russia's hand to persuade Syria to give up chemical weapons. Now, I'm not saying that the war is postponed, but the chances are still quite good that some kind of a diplomatic solution would emerge. So I look at the bottom line. I'm not that hung up on whether Obama did a good job or bad job of handing over to the decision to Congress to decide. But I think in the final analysis, if his decision resulted in postponement of war, or actually avoidance of war, that's even a better thing.
Yeah,
so
I'm interesting. Yeah, there are points on both sides of it, and sometimes you don't like to have a delay, but maybe a delay works in your favor. It allows other events to intercede. It allows other solutions to present themselves, and maybe, I don't know if he actually anticipated that, but that's what seems to have happened.
Yeah, that is true. It reminds me of one of the incidents of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Nikita Khrushchev, who was Prime Minister of the Soviet Union at that time, during the crisis, he sent two messages to President Kennedy. One was a pretty tough message, and one was a soft message. So Kennedy decided to ignore the tough message and answer the soft message, and that led to, as we were told, an avoidance of nuclear brinkmanship, nuclear crisis between Russia and the Soviet Union and the United States. So this is not exactly the same example, but if by Obama's delayed action or the decision to delay military attack on Syria, if that were to lead to the end of any possibility of war, that's a great thing.
Well, let's look at some of the ripple effect. What can you give us a handle from your observation? You're right there in the Beltway, and I'm sure people talk about little else these days. What has this done for Congress? In many ways, Congress has been dysfunctional over the tax issues and funding and spending and budget and whatnot. And I'm sure that there was a possibility when the president turned it over to Congress that they would be dysfunctional. Maybe in some ways they are dysfunctional in this as well as other things. But what has happened in Congress? What's the dynamic in Congress because of this?
Well, I think some suggestions are that Congress would have disapproved it. So in this case, at least from my point of view, since I don't like to see United States getting involved in future wars, from my point of view, the dysfunctionality of the Congress, which you have rightly pointed out, is not a bad thing. It's working in favor of peace or avoidance of war. So the chances, of course, Obama is still going to ask Congress to approve or reject his decision. And if I were to be a betting man, I would say there are 50 to 51% of the chance that Congress would disapprove it, because the mood of the country is very much against the war. American people are tired of wars. 59%, today's poll said 59% of the people oppose military action on Syria, and they want Congress to vote against it. So considering all these variables, congressional dysfunctionality, perhaps on a very rare occasion, is not a bad thing.
What about the possibility of a sort of negotiated result? In other words, missile strikes, but no boots on the ground. I mean, Congress is considering all kinds of options. There's all kinds of negotiations going on. What about that? I mean, is that a worthy possibility right now, either in terms of getting it adopted by Congress, getting it accepted by the president, and for that matter, whether it's practical?
If I understand your question correctly, I don't think there's going to be any likelihood of boots on the ground. That's totally out. How much, what level of military action, that is such a messy situation that I'm not sure Congress is going to go there. Congress is either going to approve a limited action, whatever that means, or disapprove. That's all they're going to do. In terms of boots on the ground, President Obama has always said that there are not going to be any boots on the ground. So that option is not even being considered. I know that Senator John McCain wanted some sort of a boots on the ground type of a thing, but President Obama has never committed himself to having boots on the ground in the impending Syrian conflict.
So we're really only talking about sending missiles in and using remote control devices. And I'm wondering your thoughts about, well, first, what's Congress's thought about that? I mean, are there members of Congress who support that right now?
Well, I don't exactly know who supports what at this point, but I think in general there's going to be support. If Congress were to support President Obama, it'll be for cruise missile attacks, the use of Air Force bombers, and those types of activities, because that's going to not involve American lives. And some sort of an action whereby the so-called collateral damage is going to be minimum in Syria, because that can also come back and haunt President Obama. So at this point, well, especially since this morning, everybody's so optimistic that Syria would hand over the chemical weapons to somebody else, and so on and so forth, that euphemism or anticipated use of euphemism is taking over all other facts and the grim facts of impending war. So I'm not sure at this point which congressman or which senator is going to go how far. The specifics are not clear at this point.
What are the pros and cons, though, of, say, using missiles or bombers? One point has been raised, which I think affects a lot of people. You talk about public opinion, is the possibility that if Assad loses the country be overrun by Al-Qaeda, and then we're really worse off than we were. So what are the pros and cons in a very cold, rational analysis of using missiles and bombs or not?
Well, Jay, there's always that problem that no matter how limited the action is going to be, that is going to weaken the Bashar al-Assad's regime. So how weak the regime is going to be before it's overthrown, I don't think President Obama is going to be losing a lot of sleep, because right now he's more interested in trying to have some limited action option so that he can stop the regime's action to use chemical weapons. Now, once or if military action were to take place, from my point of view, I don't think the Bashar al-Assad regime is going to last very long. A weekend regime is definitely going to be not pretty much of a sitting duck, but that's going to encourage the heck out of the opposition. And here's the problem: we have no clue, we have no strategy about the post-Assad era. What is going to happen? Who's going to take charge? Frankly, it's not in our control. We can shoot missiles at him. We can bomb the heck out of his airfields and his military bases. But what happens if or when he goes in Syria is totally beyond our control, totally beyond anyone's control. So in all likelihood, it's going to be a big chaos. It's going to be big chaos. And of course, Al-Qaeda is a minor element, but a lot of Islamists who are not part of Al-Qaeda, they are fighting. And of course, Al-Qaeda affiliated organization has been fighting extremembe well. They've established a very, very credible record of being an effective fighting force. So the chances are that if Bashar al-Assad's regime goes, then some sort of extremists are going to come to power. The chances of that are pretty high. I'm sure within the bowels of National Security Council of President Barack Obama, they're having the discussion and they're developing some sort of options. I'm not sure what those options, how effective those options are going to be, because as you know, once war is started, everybody loses control. Yeah. So from that point of view, I am very much worried about the future of Syria. In fact, if I were to be a betting man, I would say that after Bashar, there's going to be a lot of chaos in Syria, and there's going to be an awful lot of instability.
Yeah, and they're right in the middle of the region, and the way my observation is the way it sets up is that if they're unstable, the whole region is unstable. If they go into chaos, there's a fair chance the region will go into chaos. Yeah. And whatever happens in this foray that we're talking about, go or no go, that looks like the path we're going to go down. And so I guess a larger question just occurs to me is, what can we do about this to hold the region together and not let it collapse?
Well, the first thing we can do, and I hope we do, is not attack Syria and come up with some sort of a diplomatic solution, as suggested by the Russians and seemingly ostensibly accepted by the Syrian government. If that were to develop, that perhaps in the long run, maybe 3 to 4 months or even 6 months, some sort of a political solution would emerge. But here is another problem. Even if there were to be some political resolution, I don't think any Syrian anti-government force of any worth is going to accept a future resolution of the Syrian conflict as a result of which Bashar al-Assad is going to stay in power. So that becomes a very, very unacceptable situation from the point of view of Assad government and from the point of view of its main ally, Russia.
Do we have control to make sure he doesn't remain in power? I mean, this all sounds like Chamberlain and peace in our time and the policy of appeasement. Don't you think there's a parallel there?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're comparing apples and oranges. We have no control over it. We have no control over who is going to come to power. I don't think even the Syrian opposition is going to listen to us. Syrian opposition is very much interested in getting our help to oust Bashar al-Assad. But if Bashar al-Assad is not ousted because of a diplomatic development, they still want Bashar al-Assad to be out one way or another. And so in that sense, we don't have very much of an influence. We have quite a bit of influence as long as the military option is alive, and as long as the Syrian opposition knows and thinks that we're going to help oust Bashar al-Assad. But they under no circumstances, I see no reason to believe that any Syrian fighting group is going to accept Bashar al-Assad, in power, or any type of government which has Bashar al-Assad as president.
Yeah, the natural market, the natural process within the country. But do you feel that Congress, there's a chance here that Congress will affirmatively say no action? You asked us, Mr. President, and we're telling you no action. We're having a vote, both houses, no action. Do you think there's a possibility they'll do that?
I think if there is a no action vote, it's going to be a close call. I don't see, because President Obama's spin machine, his propaganda machine, has been very active globally in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, trying to persuade the global public opinion, as it were, and trying to persuade American public opinion. President Obama has given 6 or 7 interviews today to different major networks, and of course, I think he's going to be talking to the nation tomorrow. So all of this has to have some effect. I think that the bottom line is, from my point of view, is if there's going to be a vote, or when there's going to be a vote, it's going to be a close call, either 50 to 51 go or 50 to 51 no go.
Oh, these are exciting times. What
If you
Europe,
use the Chinese, if you use the Chinese definition, it's exciting.
Right. The best of times, the worst of times.
Exactly.
A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens. Anyway, what about Europe? It strikes me that Europe, that he hasn't, the president hasn't had a lot of success in jawboning Europe, and in fact, the Parliament in the UK turned him down. What's happening? What's their thinking, and how are they, expressing themselves on the issue?
Well, I think Europe has not been in favor of any wars. I mean, they were, as you recall, during the Iraq War, before the invasion, there was so much opposition in France and in Germany against the war, regarding war. And right now, Europe is very much in sympathy with some sort of a diplomatic solution. Europe is very much in sympathy, even if Europe were to go along with military action. It'll be only after United Nations were to give the war a conclusive report that yes, chemical weapons have been used by the regime. See, that is the problem. Chemical weapons have been used, but whether they have been used by the regime or not, that is the biggest mystery. Mm-hmm. So if that mystery were to be resolved by the UN inspector's report, then Europe would go along with limited military action. Now, UK has always been our best ally, or highly supportive ally, number one ally, and so on and so forth. But given the type of blind following that former Prime Minister Blair has done of President Bush's invasion of Iraq, I think the public opinion is totally opposed to war, and of course majority of the British Parliament is opposed to the war. That's the reason. Otherwise, the government is very much Cameron's government is very much in support of President Obama's military action. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing they can do. They cannot commit forces. Only France has said it's going to support our military action.
What about the United Nations? Ban Ki-moon has not been a strong Secretary General, and the United Nations, aside from detailing its regular staff to try to get access to the areas where the weapons were used, and chemical weapons were used, they really haven't found them. They haven't come to a decision. They haven't made an affirmative finding one way or the other, although it certainly seems that the chances are that if they had access, they would find that there was chemical weapons. But what is the UN doing its job here? Is the UN useful in this whole affair?
Well, from my point of view, yes. I think United Nations. See, United Nations is going to be as powerful as the member states want it to be.
Yeah.
Now, everybody is very critical of the United Nations, but who is going to give them how much power? Because there are a whole bunch of countries and their sovereignties and their egos and their prestige is involved, and under the worst circumstances, in dealing with huge egos and huge power, balance of power relations issues, the United Nations is doing a very good job. It is the only entity which has international legitimacy. The United States certainly doesn't have any. I mean, we have no legitimacy, no credibility, in terms of telling the world that this is what we have found. In fact, within this country, there is no consensus or even majority opinion that yes, we have definitely found evidence that the regime has used chemical weapons. American intelligence service has had a very bad reputation. The so-called slam dunk. Remember the slam dunk comment of George Tenet to President Bush about yes, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Mm-hmm. After that.
Looking back on it, that was an outrage.
Exactly. So if you remember that, then who is going to remember? Who is going to believe what President Obama or anybody would say, especially quoting our own intelligence services to the world that yes, we have credible evidence. I certainly have my serious doubt that we have credible evidence. I would like to see. I would like our government to show it to the world as much as it's possible. Make it believable. You just don't take the word of the president or secretary of state or secretary of defense. In fact, you will notice that the two major cabinet members of President Bush, Kerry as secretary of state and Hagel as secretary of defense, the loudest voice you hear is of Kerry, not Hagel. Both were supposed to be doves, and Kerry all of a sudden has become a super hawk. So, you cannot start a war by raising your voice and by shouting or by waving finger. And you have to have some credible evidence. You have to present your argument quite logically and thoughtfully. And of course, you have to use power of persuasion, which President Obama is using today and tomorrow. But I don't think in the absence of any persuasive evidence shown to at least our own Congress, Obama is going to go anywhere.
Well, it's troubling because he doesn't have the support of the country on this issue. He doesn't have the support of Europe, especially the UK. He doesn't have any real support in the United Nations in the sense that anything in front of the Security Council is going to be vetoed by Russia and or China or both. Yet he goes on his speaking tours and he makes the appearances and he tries nevertheless to convince the world directly and through Secretary of State Kerry that military action should be taken. At the end of the day, it sure looks like he's going to lose credibility by being out there on a limb by himself, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you take a look at G20 conference. He was really ignored. I mean, his appeal. Europeans said, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll support you. In principle, we agree with the military action, but we have to wait until we get the UN report and find out that the regime has used." So he has been told in no uncertain terms, "We don't believe you. You show us evidence, and of course we'll only believe the evidence from the United Nations. After that, we'll decide whether to support you or not." In fact, they would support if there is credible evidence given to the world by the United Nations. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is probably one of the major crises of President Obama's presidency.
Not to say that this is dispositive, but there were two articles in today's Star Advertiser about this whole subject. One is taken from the New York Times by Nicholas Kristof on the question of, whether it's a good idea to oppose missile strikes. We've covered that a little bit. But the other I find very interesting, and that is leaders take debate over Syria to the media. The media battlefield is actually the headline. And you were referring to that in Obama's attempts to reach the people through the media. But what strikes me, and I'm really interested in your thoughts about it, is that he has elected not to do this on his own. He rather referred it to Congress, which everyone knew, that would be a hard row to hoe. And now the decision. This is so interesting in the 21st century. The decision is probably going to be made by the process of the media talking to the people and the people talking to the media. It's almost as if the government people who might have simply made a decision here, in earlier times they would simply have made a decision. Now, in the 21st century, we leave it up to this resonant process between the media and the public. Have things changed? Is this the new world of government decision making? Is it the new world in which we declare war with the a corroboration of everyone in the world? Is it a new time now that the media and the people make the decision effectively?
Well, they will definitely. That is an excellent point you're raising. We are living in an information age. Information rules. Now, what I would modify your statement just a little bit. I would say that yes, media is playing an important role in shaping public opinion. except that American media is no longer that important or that dominant as far as the world is concerned. Now, American media becomes just another actor. The global media becomes extremely important. Media in the Middle East, media in Asia, media in Africa, or whatever region the conflict happens to be. Then you have social media. You have Twitters and so on and so forth, Facebooks and LinkedIn, and they have their own role in terms of exchanges and blogs and so on and so forth. So yeah, this development, this explosion of information in the 21st century is definitely playing a very, very important role. A very, very important role. I mean, gone are the days when we look at presidents and prime ministers in awe and say, "Oh, they're so wise, they know so much. Maybe they know something which we don't." Now, when the president gets in front of the camera, we kind of laugh at the suggestion that yes, I have credible evidence. Like the man from Missouri, show me. The world is saying, show me the evidence. The global media is saying, so yes, I think you may make an excellent point. Global media is playing a very important role, and I, for one, am not unhappy about it because it's an excellent thing. If we can scrutinize all these complicated issues, analyze and reanalyze and look at it and pick it apart and put it together, and in the process we find some diplomatic solution to complex and explosive issues. So more power to the world media, more power to us. This is a wonderful kind of democracy in operation, whereby we are looking for diplomatic solutions to our problems and not looking at war as a solution to anything, because war is not a solution to anything.
It's interesting. You talk about global media. Global media is different today than it was. It's just a couple of small anecdotal examples of that. So recently we have Al Jazeera opening up all over the country, becoming a major news organization within the United States. I mean, a few years ago that was unthinkable. And now here they are, side by side with the major news organs in the country. And then we have, I don't know if you followed, but the CCTV, maybe 3 years ago, the Chinese decided they wanted to have a global news organization too. So they created it virtually overnight, and it has great presence and some credibility, even though it's clear that it's going to advance the interests of China. But I mean, what's happening, and I follow on your point a minute ago, is that American news media is not as influential on the global stage as it used to be. And other media coming from other countries, other powerful countries, other smart countries that realize, or news organizations that realize that we are in a new time as far as global media is concerned, are making great advances on the global stage. So when you talk about the media and talk about the public interacting with the media, it's no longer one country or even one continent. It's the whole world now, yeah?
Well, speaking of Al Jazeera, of course, the good thing about Al Jazeera is that they opened an office in Washington, United States. But the bad thing is, my local supplier of Al Jazeera discontinued my Al Jazeera from Doha. So, I'm no longer in a position to determine what kind of a role Al Jazeera's analysis is playing in the Syrian conflict. However, let me just make a quick point that I watched Arab Awakening starting, the November or December of 2010, all the way until a couple of months ago when they closed my Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera did a superb job, Jay. Al Jazeera did a superb job of providing street coverage, and no American media was there. I mean, I looked for CNN, they weren't there. Looked for CNBC or anybody, or Fox, definitely they weren't there, and Fox wasn't there, and thank God for that. But because of these sophisticated international media, Radio Russia, of course, all of them have an agenda. So does CNN, so does BBC. So no major station channel, TV station is without an agenda. But in terms of coverage of complex events, the role that Al Jazeera is playing is definitely going to be appreciated by the U.S. public once they get a chance to watch the Al Jazeera coverage. In fact, Hillary Clinton herself, as Secretary of State, she gave the ultimate compliment to Al Jazeera by saying that Al Jazeera did a superb job of covering the Arab awakening. My point is that the role of global media in attempting to avoid wars by insisting that we look for diplomatic solutions, we look for peaceful solution, is an excellent development of the information age, at least from my point of view.
Let's take a short break, Ehsan. We'll take just a 1 minute break. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, Asia in Review, especially west of Asia, with Ehsan Ahrari, Dr. Ehsan Ahrari of Strategic Paradigms in the Beltway in Washington. We're talking about Syria, go or no go, a snapshot and prediction of where we are and where we are going with regard to the use of military force against Syria. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech series. I'm also the managing director of Kumukuhua Theater in beautiful downtown Honolulu at 46 Merchant Street. Right now we have an incredible show running called Will the Real Charlie Chan Please Stand Up? The Charlie Chan was based on a real-life detective right here in Chinatown, and Nancy P. Moss has written a wonderful script that Reiko Ho has done an excellent job of directing. It's running at Kumukuhua until September 22nd. You can find more information at kumukuhua.org. I hope to see you there. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidell. Yes, this is ThinkTech, broadcasting on Ustream and Spreaker both day and night, doing its thing on OC16 and Olelo, and uploading videos all over YouTube. Check us out and see the links on thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo. We're back, we're live, we're here at ThinkTech. We're talking about Asia in Review, and specifically west of Asia, with our old friend Ehsan Ahrari of Strategic Paradigms in Washington. And the subject of our discussion is Syria, go or no go, a snapshot and a prediction possibly of where we are and where we are going with regard to the use of military might against Syria. And so, Ehsan, I wanted to ask you in this part of the show, how this dynamic we've seen, where the president a few months ago puts down a red line in the sand, and now he has to find a way to pull that line up again, because he can't really follow through on the threat he made directly by implication a few months ago. So my question, and it reminds me, as I told you during the break, of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we played by ultimatum. But ultimata, to use the plural, doesn't work that well anymore, especially with the global media phenomena we've been talking about. And maybe looking back, a red line in the sand is not a great way to go. What do you think? Have we learned about ultimata practice, about drawing red lines in the sand in international affairs like this?
I think President Obama has definitely learned, because he said yesterday, I think, that the use of the phrase red line was probably not advised. So in that sense, he's going to be more careful. But Jay, the way from my point of view, President Obama has been very cool, very calculated, very pragmatic, very level-headed about dealing with this crisis. Now, the fact that he has drawn the line in the sand, perhaps he should not have used that phrase, but he had to threaten, he had to persuade or convey to the Syrian regime that the United States is dead serious about taking some sort of an action if Syrian regime were to use chemical weapons or continue to use chemical weapons. So in that sense, his decision to threaten Syria is not a bad thing, because as a result of that threat, when Russia saw that there's no way it's going to avoid its ally being attacked, so they put pressure on Syria to do something and give up its chemical weapons. So in that sense, I applaud President Obama's way of handling this crisis. But whether he's going to be using this kind of a language in future crises, especially in terms of dealing with Iran, that's an entirely different ballgame. I don't know whether he's going to be using that kind of a language. But in terms of his handling of the whole situation, he's been doing a very, very effective job. As long as there is no war, I think American people are not going to regret, are not going to take to hold anything against President Obama and his handling of this situation.
So, one thing that struck me, and I think I mentioned it to you the last time we spoke, is that if you draw a red line and then you have to back off the red line, you're losing credibility. And in some sense,
he's not using the red line and then backing out. He's not backing out. Actually, if you use that, if you want to use that kind of phraseology, Syria is backing out, Russia is backing out. So United States is serious about the use of force, and it may still happen, God forbid, in 2 or 3 days or a week or whatever. But because he used a strong language, because he persuaded Vladimir Putin and Bashar al-Assad that he's dead serious about military action, that forced their hand to make a decision which is acceptable to the United States. I'm not still sure whether the United States is going to accept. We're saying that we're going to accept if Assad gives up his chemical weapons, but we're going to be more specific about it. And the more specific we're going to be, the less of the likelihood that Bashar al-Assad would comply. But if he were to comply, and I think he's smart enough to know that he has to comply, he's avoiding crisis. So in that sense, I think he's doing a good job.
Yeah, and actually, it's not going badly. It seems like we're having a global conversation. It's a conversation with many voices, and ultimately it seems to be pointed in what could be a good direction. It strikes me that one thing is clear here, whatever happens in terms of this country's decision, is Bassad's not going to use these weapons again. That would be lunatic to do that, because then he would invite all kinds of retribution, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% convinced of that.
And to go further, any despot in the world who had these weapons would have to, after this affair, he would have to think twice about using them, especially on his own people, don't you think?
Absolutely. That is a definite yes.
So what here is going to happen? I mean, it seems to me that in some ways we've crossed the Rubicon. We're already in a place where we're not going to have military intervention, but we are. But in a certain sense, there are positive implications for how this is likely to go. But how do you think it's going to proceed?
I think it's going to proceed along the following lines. I think the United States and Russia would proceed to develop the modalities of taking charge of some other country taking charge of the chemical weapon stocks of Syria, and there's going to be modalities in specifics and blueprints about inspection of all the chemical weapon areas, and storage facilities, and making sure that Syria no longer has chemical weapons. And after that, simultaneously, I think a process is going to develop, a diplomatic process, whereby some sort of a negotiating rounds are going to take place, either in Doha, Qatar, or in Geneva, or somewhere else in the Middle East, whereby all parties are going to get together and try to discuss, to figure out where to go next. But as I said earlier, that's where the problem would reemerge, because I don't think the anti-Assad forces are going to accept any solution as a result of which Bashar al-Assad is going to stay in power. On the other hand, Bashar al-Assad is not going to accept any solution whereby he has to leave. Neither will Russia accept a solution of that sort. So again, but cooler heads have to prevail. As long as they are talking, they're not fighting, they're not killing each other, they're not blowing up each other, or shooting chemical weapons at each other. I have a very strong sense that some sort of a solution has to emerge. And I think Bashar al-Assad is smart enough to know that ultimately he has to go. Either he has to go as a result of accepting some sort of assurances that he's not going to be tried for genocide or crimes against crimes against humanity. But my sense is, at the same time, my sense is that nobody can give him that guarantee because he's already killed over 100,000 people. So I think Bashar al-Assad's regime is doomed, regardless of whether he goes as a result of the United States military attack or as a result of diplomatic solutions. I think regime change is going to happen in Syria, even through diplomatic measures as a result of diplomatic maneuvers. But that would be a very, very preferable solution, at least from my point of view.
Ehsan, I just have one other sort of grand question for you. Not an easy question. I'll tell you in advance. So let's assume between the two of us that this is going to pass off the front page in a reasonable amount of time. One way or the other, it's going to get worked out, without the worst case analysis. What's going to pop up next in the Middle East? Egypt was never resolved. Iran certainly never resolved, and we have Iraq and Afghanistan not resolved, and other countries in the region. What do you think is going to be the next front page story?
Oh, it could be Egypt. It could be Egypt. It could be Jordan. We have a powerful force presence in Jordan, which is next door to Syria. Because there's going to be the restive population there, and the regime is not very popular. And of course, Jordan is one of our strongest allies, so that may pop up. Iraq, I think, is deteriorating. Iraq is getting really a very, very bad place. Al-Qaeda is becoming extremely powerful. See, that's what Syria worries me so much, because Al-Qaeda from Iraq has moved on to Syria. So they're kind of spreading their evil influence, evil presence from Iraq to Syria. Of course, they haven't left Iraq. They're becoming more powerful in Iraq. So you have that. Then you have Lebanon is a very, very explosive place. You have Hezbollah, and that's a pro-Iran group, which is a paramilitary organization as well as a political organization. So you have it has been challenging the sovereignty of the civilian government. And then you have in the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen is a powder keg. Yemen is an extremely unstable place. Al-Qaeda is extremely powerful there. You have secessionist tendencies between northern Yemen or southern Yemen. You have water shortage. You have extreme poverty. You have the youngest, one of the youngest population. I think about 60% or more people are under the age of 25 or 20. So that is a very, very dangerous situation. And right across the Gulf of Eden, you have the Gulf, Horn of Africa. You have that's another extremely that's a mother of all failed states is Somalia and Eritrea and Ethiopia. They're all there. So you have a variety of things that is going to be popping up and probably moving on to second or third page of the newspaper without being resolved. So we're not done with crises. God forbid, if we don't have a war, we have to celebrate that for just a little bit, but then start working seriously to avoid future wars.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Ehsan, I mean, it's not cause for optimism, but it does suggest that you and I, and David Day for that matter, will be talking on into the future about these various possibilities.
Yes, indeed.
Ehsan Ahrari of Strategic Paradigms in Washington on our Asia in Review West of Asia series, talking today about Syria, go or no go, a snapshot and prediction of where we are and where we're going on military action against Syria. Thank you so much, Ehsan. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much.
Aloha.